Now, older adults have unique developmental challenges. There's some things that are specific to them. For example, when you're working with an older adult in your treatment program, yeah, they may have lost a lot. We find even with younger people, we have a number of people in our treatment center that when they lose a close loved one, they will go into an episode of substance use. And then they'll get a DUI, they get arrested, whatever it might be. But that loss mainly because they don't have anywhere else to go with it, possibly. But that sense of loss is when they'll be like, okay, I don't know what to do. I just lost my grandmother. She was my mother. She was the closest person ever to me, and I have nowhere to go with that. So they may have lost their spouse, they may have lost their grandparents. If you think about a centenarian, when a person's over 100 years of age, they may have lost their children and many of their grandchildren even. So there's a lot of loss that's happened there. They've got an increase in the numbers of deaths of their friends who are their same age. And so as a person ages and people at their same age are passing away, that can be very painful because they're like, people like me, I think it's in our nature to connect with people like us. And so people like me, 70-year-old person says, I'm 70 and all my 70-year-old friends are dying. One of our members today, Dorothy, said I had a woman in her 80s who had an alcohol problem and her family did an intervention with her. I knew she had some serious falls because of this. And she couldn't accept it, wanted to know what I thought. And I asked her if drinking had caused her problems. And she was then silent. She seemed to understand and accept this. That's the perfect approach that we're talking about. What complications, what problems has drinking or substance use caused for you? So some of the uniqueness that we deal with is going to be that this population has lost people around them. Secondly, not only have they lost older people around them, they've lost people their own age. Another complication for them is that their roles are changing. So maybe they're not working anymore. So now some of my friends who've retired said, Paul, I'm working more now than I was before I was retired. And I think what they mean by that, I know one friend, he said, I've become the family taxi driver, and he takes the grandkids to everything, and he's running here and there and running back and forth, and it's just keeps busy all the time. But one of the frustrations for elderly people is that their role has changed. Their routine has changed. They don't have the income that they had before. And so if they're on a very fixed income and they were used when they were working, they could work more, make a little bit more money and spend that. Now they're on a fixed income and their income level is less, especially if you can't get by just on Social Security anymore. And then their normal age-related cognitive and physical decline. So, I've talked to some people around me who are older, my age or older, in their mid-60s and older, and they're like, certain words I can't remember. We talk about, if you have Alzheimer's or Alzheimer's or dementia, it's not that you can't remember where you put your keys. It's that you can't remember what keys are. That's a world of a difference, right? And so when you have people that are frustrated because they are a lot of things they can't remember, they're not, their brains are not connecting the dots as well as they used to. And that can create a lot of stress and frustration. This can lead them to substance use then. This was a study that I found that I thought was interesting, that they were saying that people addicted to cocaine in their younger ages may have an accelerated age decline in the temporal lobe, gray matter, because the temporal lobe compared to control groups who didn't use cocaine. And so this could make them more vulnerable to adverse consequences of cocaine as they age. So there are certain drugs that we may have used in our youth that may have affected issues in different ways. We're going to get to some of these other causes in a few minutes, but things like isolation, when the person's children won't allow them to be around the grandchildren. Oh boy, that's for a whole topic of itself, isn't it? But what we do want to be aware of, I don't know if you're familiar with what we call meth brain, but many people who use a high amount of methamphetamine will develop a meth psychosis, And so we had a young man, for example, in our treatment center. He told me, he said, look, I know you put glass in my mayonnaise in my sandwich the other day. I said, no, we didn't put glass in your sandwich. No, you put shards of glass in my sandwich. I said, okay, I'm telling you honestly, we didn't do that, but he was in a meth psychosis. So we sent him to a detox center, and he went there. Now, this was 4 or 5 years ago. Well, he came back to the treatment center to our program. Here it is 5 years later, and he had gotten a DUI. And he said, look, Dr. Paul, I haven't used meth in 5 years. I got married. I have 2 children. I kind of slipped and I drank a little bit too much and I got a DUI. But I will tell you, my life is nothing like it was back then. I said, well, you mind if I ask you a question? He said, yeah. I said, so when you thought we put, just think of this, please. When you thought that we put shards of glass in your sandwich, what was that like for you? He said, oh, I was just going crazy back then. And he said, it was all the meth. And when I got off the meth, all of that psychosis stopped. Well, the same thing with cocaine. There may be parts of the brain that are affected that some people will never get back. And it will have a reciprocating effect as they age, so that when they get older, they'll find that they're not able to recuperate certain things that they may have lost. Some parts of the brain, much of the brain will recuperate or regenerate. There are those parts, what we're talking about here in the temporal lobe, may not recuperate as well. Let's think about the statistic for a second. So if 63% of our elderly population that abused drugs said that their use was influenced by depression and anxiety, I think that's a very important number. Over half of our elderly population would say that they are using because they're depressed and anxious. If I'm honest with you, I think younger people are going to say the same thing. I think for younger people, 40s and under, it's more stress related, whereas as people age, it's more anxiety and depression related.